I wanted to focus today on the National School Climate Standards because in all of the PD work that we do through the Connecticut Accountability for Learning Initiative, we tend to mention the standards, but don't frame them in important ways that I think are providing a great deal of help for districts and organizations who adopt them. And so as we're going through this, those of you who are here representing your districts, consider adoption as a way to include the very important work of school climate. And as you'll see, it's about everything that we do. So let's get started. And I thought maybe a good place to begin would be to start by suggesting that our orientation in Connecticut and nationally has generally been as a way of fixing the problem. I mean, this work around climate, in fact in Connecticut, we've been talking climate before Columbine. Not many people have been doing that, but we in Connecticut have since the late 90s. But when bully mania began, and Columbine seems to be the crucible, we started to say we've got to intervene, we've got to fix bullying, we've got to prevent bullying, we've got to intervene with bullying, and we've got to shift our focus away from this notion of fixing a problem to creating the climate. It's a completely different orientation. It's also having a positive climate as the ultimate remedy for this beast we call bullying. Okay. In general, and we've all been triangled and coned to death, but whether you're thinking through the lens of SRBI or some other kind of model, what generally happens is we're supposed to be focusing most of our attention on universal practices, which again would be focusing on the climate. But what ends up happening, because America is very good at intervening and fixing things and waiting till there's a problem, we end up spending most of our time intervening and very little of our time focusing on the climate. And we have to right that cone and get it back to where it ought to be. I'd like to introduce to you, this is a model that we really promote as the foundation of our school climate work. And if you can wrap your arms around this particular model, I think it's very helpful in framing what we have to do, not just for climate, but for all of the work. And as you'll see when we talk about what climate includes, it is about teaching and learning, it is about safety, it is about relationships, it's about the big picture. But if you look at this, we call it a school climate development model, and my colleague Marta Coons will be here later on if you don't know anything about the Connecticut Accountability for Learning Initiative and that professional development work that we do, sponsored by the state, and it's no cost to anybody to attend. We present this up front. And if you look at these two axes, you will see that up here, what is our focus? Is the focus on the individual student, the individual adult, or is the focus on the environment? And on the vertical axis, we have a different focus. What's our purpose? Is our purpose to intervene, or is our purpose to develop and create? And when you put all these two pieces together, you arrive at 4 quadrants. And the one that represents the red part of the cone, that we spend a great deal of our time, probably more than we should, is over here. We're dealing with problem solving and we're intervening with student behavior. We're waiting until something happens and then we're dealing with the problem. Now sometimes we have a larger school problem and then we intervene and we throw in an assembly and we do something for all school, and that's when we have school-wide interventions. But in general, if we're honest, most of us spend far too much time on the upper half of this model and really spend a great deal of time here. There's only 100% of our time. And when we ask folks where they spend it, generally speaking, 75, 80%, they admit, is on this upper half, and probably, at least half the time, that's what we're doing, is just intervening when a student misbehaves and so on. Where we should be is focusing on individual skill growth and development, but to give young people the tools and the skills, they have to have an environment that is safe and respectful in which to practice those skills. So the more we can focus on the lower half of this quadrant, and especially pay attention to what it takes to create a safe and respectful school, the less time we'll have to spend on the upper half, and especially intervening with problems. So if you can wrap your arms around this model, it's very helpful in figuring out where we need to go and what we need to do. Okay, why talk about this with school climate? You notice that in my title and my job description from day one, we used to call it character education. That's where I did my work, gosh, it's 35 years ago, on moral education. We used to call it that. But now it's changed. It's moved to bullying, and now, but it's always been about school climate. And our historians, those who were writing about creating schools way back in the progressive era, I hate to forget that there was a man named John Dewey who talked about what schooling was supposed to be as we reinvent where we need to go. We'll go back, because Dewey was right. We really do have to create the kind of environments where everybody can build community and work together and learn together. In any case, it's gone through a whole lot of different titles, but I think nationally, you're hearing more and more and more, it's not just in Connecticut, but nationally, the language is switching to climate. Because school climate is something that everybody can embrace and wrap their arms around in terms of a concept that's positive. Nobody out there, not one of your schools, not one state, not one, whether it's a small school or a large district, is against creating a positive climate. That's just not politically correct. You don't say that. But to say, we have bullying intervention, we have character education, either it sounds like there's one more thing to do, and we all know we have far too much to do, or it smacks of some kind of, we have a problem. We don't have any bullying here, so why do we need to, we don't have any. Bullying is a very negative, toxic concept. In any case, if you talk school climate, it doesn't sound like you have one more thing to do. And that is really important. It's about how we do what we do. And with that orientation, it helps guide practice. So school climate is the way we ought to be talking about this work, even when that word and that concept bullying comes into play. Because I'll say again, the ultimate remedy for bullying, which is about negative interactions with people, is to have the kind of climate that doesn't support negative interactions with people. So school climate is the remedy. But school climate is not the same as conflict resolution, and it certainly is not the same as a discipline climate. If you talk about a climate of, how we discipline young people, that's different. And it's also much, much wider and larger than intervening with bullying. So school climate is a wonderful umbrella term, and it really does embrace all that we do. Now, I mentioned that bullying is a toxic concept, and I'm the lucky person at the state that receives inquiries and questions about the law and about what's happening with individual kids and so on. And in all the, I'm approaching now about 1,450 different issues that have come to my attention, unique issues since I started the state in 2005. And in all of those matters, I can count on one hand the number of family members who have called about their child who's been labeled a bully. Everybody else is about a targeted child. And in every single one of those cases where I'm hearing from a family member of a child who is a, quote, bully, they want to know how they get that label removed from their child's record. My child's not a bully, my child's reactive, my child was just, he can be impulsive, but my child's not a bully. So we have no school that wants to advertise they have any bullying. You don't see big signs. I'm not a fan of signage or language that's out there that even uses the word when it says, no bullying, or, line through the international sign for nothing, you know, we don't do this here. If you put a huge 3-story sign with that international sign with the word bully through it, red line, nobody walks in that school from child to family member to school community member, teacher, administrator, walks through that sign and goes, wow, great reminder, because nobody sees themselves as being a bully. And so we don't want it, no parent will say their child's a bully. And when I say parent, it stands for parent, guardian, foster parent, adoptive parent, grandparent, anybody who's a guardian of a child. So nobody wants to have their child be a bully. Certainly schools don't want to say, wow, we've had 50 cases of bullying this past month. I mean, that's tantamount to saying our school is unsafe and let's lower property values even more than they are. So we don't have that kind of admission. The only constituent in a school community who relishes that label is the target or the targeted child's family. Tell me my child's been bullied. They're the only one. So we've got this really toxic concept that isn't helping us develop a positive climate, and that's why I linger on that a little bit. So it's a problem when we look through the lens of bullying. We have to move away from being in reaction mode to being in where we need to go and what are the conditions we have to set, so we are not constantly reacting to problems and playing catch up and being in that place.